All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Saturday to those of you that are joining me live for this webinar. Good for you for taking time out on your precious weekend to join me here. You'll be able to have the opportunity to ask some questions at the end. So that's exciting. But today we are talking about how to pass the exam on the first try. For those of you that maybe are here for the next webinar, just know that you'll have to leave and then come back in for the next one, which is for those that have already taken the exam before. Okay, so that's just a little side note. But yes, today we're going to talk about how to pass the exam on the first try. Before we dive in, I just want to share a little background on myself and the company for anyone that's new or has never heard of All Access Dietetics before. So my name is Jenny Westerkamp, and I am the CEO and founder of All Access Dietetics. My fun fact is that I'm also the team nutritionist for the Chicago Bulls. So I've been in pro sports on the side while also running All Access Dietetics since I was an RD to be back in 2009. All Access Dietetics really started as a way to make it easier to get through the process of becoming a dietitian. And we've really expanded that from when we started. So we were first an admissions coaching company where we helped people get into, apply and get into dietetic internships and graduate programs. We still do that with our Get Match coaching. And then we also now have RD exam prep in the last few years. And you'll learn more about that at the end of today. And then we have rotation toolkits. So these great toolkits on clinical, sports, geriatrics, and counseling as of right now that help you through those rotations and really give you concrete tools and training so that you can crush those rotations in your internship or in your supervised practice. Plus, there are so many other free resources. And again, if you're new and you don't have any of our free resources, you can just head to our website and there's a tab called free resources to browse around and grab what you need. All right, so that's the intro. And then the agenda today, we're going to take about 30 minutes and I'll save time for questions as well. Just so you know, because I am running this and speaking, I won't be able to answer any questions throughout unless I happen to see it and I can answer it really quick, but just know that I will get to the questions. I'll scroll back up to the top of the chat and answer those at the end. So I'll be just covering the RD exam basics. So we're all on the same page about what the RD exam is, what to expect, go through some statistics because I think those are really important to know, not to scare you, but to inform you on what this exam is and how hard it is to pass. And then I'll talk about 3 different strategies that are really big picture and really, especially for the first time test taker, which you've never experienced the RD exam before. These are really big picture that allow you to take a different approach than what people normally do when they approach the RD exam. All right, so let's get some activity going in the chat. So tell me when you are taking the exam. So what month, or if you have a date already set, you can throw that in there. I just want to see who we got here. So we have a lot of summer and spring. All right, summer and May, April. Awesome. So yeah, we really wanted to start talking about the RD exam and getting people prepared because we know a lot of you are finishing up your programs and you want to think about this earlier rather than later. So that's great. Awesome. We have one for March as well. So then the next question is, why do you want to pass the exam on your first try? Feel free to share that in the chat or think about that, right? We want to get into your why. And I think that really sets the stage so that you can get in the mindset of wanting these strategies and wanting to implement these strategies. So why do you want to pass? Okay, we want to begin your career right away so you can get a job, to be able to start work as soon as possible. Someone's moving states and it will help with the job transition. We have another person that said pride, which I think is so true and valid. It's fresh in your mind after the internship. So you don't have to pay more than once for the exam. So you don't have to worry about it and you can start your grad school in the fall. Yes, all of these are valid and common reasons why you really want to go all in on that first try. Now let's take it one more step further and then we'll move on. So how would your life change if you passed your exam on your first try? And maybe some of you were alluding to this in your answers already, but think about specifically on your first try, what does that mean? You know, you can just move on. There's a weight lifted on your shoulders. Sooner you're going to have income. Your confidence will be boosted if you pass on the first try, right? Because you're thinking, oh my gosh, everything that you've trained for and worked for to be able to do that on your first try means you really crushed it, right? Yes, all of the above, confidence, less stress. All right, see, we have lots of things that come to mind. And, you know, everyone had different things that were top of mind for them. So you want to find your why. You want to understand why it is important to pass on that first try for you and how your life will change. That really gets you, you know, this is like a big goal. This is a big accomplishment to pass the RD exam. So to get yourself in that mindset really helps you and keeps you motivated throughout those hard hours of studying. All right, so now we're in the right mindset. Let's go into some RD exam basics. And for those of you, maybe especially if you're in your internship, your program may or may not cover this. I know you're so busy with rotations if you're in that right now. And so you just haven't had that second to think, what is even the RD exam? So let's talk through some basics here. It's a minimum of 125 questions, maximum of 145. There are 25 questions that are actually piloted. So they help to determine if they should be added to the question bank in future exams. And so those might be questions that you'll be like, what is this? This doesn't even make sense. Or you might not even notice it. Just know that of the ones you take, 25 will be piloted and you won't know which ones. And then it is also a computer adaptive test. I'm going to go into more on this later, so I don't want to get too into it, except to say that computer adaptive, one way you can think about this is it is not a set of 125 predetermined questions or 125 to 145 predetermined questions. The computer actually adapts to your performance throughout the exam to serve you questions that will better tell them your competency in all 4 domains of the exam. So it's really like a choose your own adventure in a way, where if you guys remember those books back in the day, but you choose based on your performance, the test will give you different questions. So again, I'm going to talk more about that later, but just know that it's not a set predetermined amount of those questions ahead of time. There's a 2.5 hour time limit, and you must complete all 125 questions at minimum for a score. I'm going to say that again later, but take note of that. You have to answer 125 questions. I've had people that only answered 124, 123 and submitted it, and they didn't get a score. So it's not like the SAT or ACT where you can leave questions blank and they're just marked as wrong. You actually have to input scores for all 125 at minimum, and then obviously through, after that. But you do just need 125. If you keep getting served them and you run out of time, you'll still get a score based on the 125. All right, and then the 4 domains of the exam are principles of dietetics, nutrition care for individuals and groups, which is the largest component, and then management for 21%, and food service systems is the smallest with 13% of the exam. And we're going to talk more about that, but that's weighted. So it's not necessarily that you'll get served 13% of the 125 questions as food service. We'll hold that thought for now. All right, so then the poll question here, what do you think is the pass rate for first-time examinees? Drop your number in there. What percentage of people pass the exam? We've done a good job on All Access where we've told you guys this, so some of you that might have been following along. We have lots of numbers coming in ranging from 40 to 80% pass rate for first timers. Okay, we're seeing a lot of different guesses. So we'll hold that. And then what do you think is the pass rate for repeat examinees? So people that have taken it more than once, what is their pass rates? 30, 85, 50, we're getting all different answers here. So I'm very excited to share with you what the real stats are in just a minute here. And we can get all of this clarified. 95% for repeat. Okay, here we go. So these are the most recent statistics from CDR, which is the credentialing body that provides the exam. And this is from the last 6 months. Now, for those of you that don't know, the exam did change into a new cycle for 5 years, which just started in January 2022. So this is the final 6-month period for the previous version of the exam. The stats for the next version of the exam, the next like January 2022 to June 30th, 2022 won't be out obviously until that 6-month period is done. So we won't know the stats of the new exam until mid 2022, but at least we can go off of what was the most recent that we have available. So you'll see here that the most recent, this first chunk here from the past 6 months, the first time pass rate was 61%. And then that means 39% failed the exam. And then for repeat test takers, the pass rate is 32%. So 32% of people pass if it's their repeat attempt. So you're seeing like your chances technically like go down by half when you repeat test take. And I will explain and kind of give you a little bit more story behind that. But if you bundled up every single attempt, you'll see that 48% of people passed in that last 6-month period. You see some similar stats here, although you have seen the first time test rate from January 2020 go from 70% to 67% to now 61%. So we're seeing this drop. I think there's a lot of different reasons, and I can't say with certainty any of them, except that we've seen people's training or experiential supervised practice be altered by the pandemic. We've seen, just more stress among everyone, right? To where there's life obstacles and things that are getting in the way or hurting learning and critical thinking development. So, that can definitely be playing a big part of it. But let's just go with that and know that if you repeat the exam, your pass rate will go down. Now, to take a deeper look into this, so these are where they got the numbers. So there was the 1,800 or so first attempt people that passed out of the 2,900, and so that gets the 61% that we talked about. But then, just so you know, so this is a 6-month period, and so these are all the attempts that were done in that 6-month period, and it's hard to say, and if anyone knows for sure, but I believe that they're not separating this by unique test takers, right? So you can imagine that in a 6-month period, you might be able to take the exam 3 times. So we might be double counting some people in here. Let's say of the 427, maybe 100 of those people then obviously had to take it again, right? So these are the same people coming in from here from the second attempt. And I just point that out so that it's not too misleading, because we see that the same people are failing multiple times. And so we're kind of like double counting those people in the stats, at least from the way I'm interpreting them. So regardless, you can see that even on these different attempts, the pass rate goes down. And again, it's, lots of people that are stuck here that just can't seem to get over the hump to pass the exam. All right. Not the best news. I know many of you were way off on your guesses for that, but it is really, really interesting to see how the exam has changed over the years, because even in previous 5-year cycles of the exam, the pass rate was around 85%, 86%, 87%. And that was for about like 3,000 people, whereas you saw here that there's about 5,000 people that have been taking it recently. So even like the number of people that are taking it is higher compared to before, but we're seeing a higher pass rate in those past years. All right, let's think about how we're going to solve this problem, right? How you're going to be a part of the stat that passes the exam, part of the 61% as first-time test takers. So here's the typical approach that I've seen, and maybe you've already thought that this might be your approach if you're heading into this. Now, and honestly, like I did this 13 years ago when I took the exam. So I just listened to what my friends did, right? You listen to what your friends do or what someone around you is telling you to do. You try to memorize a study guide and you get overwhelmed, and then you try to buy another tool, or you take this review class, you do something else. You try to just like bounce around and try to find anything that'll help you feel better and more confident. You go through that cycle and then you take the exam having no idea if what you did will work for you, right? And that is what we see with so many first-time test takers. Of course, you see the 61%, they do pass, right? And maybe they did do this typical approach, but I don't think that that's like the type of chance you should take. I know you all said that you have your reasons for wanting to pass it on that first try. You see the pass rate go down for repeat examinees. So how can we make sure that you take the best possible approach for you? Now, the better approach, which we'll talk about today, is that you really want to understand the RD exam. I mean, many of you didn't even know what the pass rates, right? So that's just the beginning of understanding the RD exam. And then you want to reflect on your past academic experiences, work experiences, your life, your test taking abilities, all the things that are unique to you and not your friends that will help you determine what the best method and strategy is moving forward. From there, you will create a plan. You will actually plan out like a syllabus, like an academic like class. You're going to create your plan, and then you're going to follow that plan with accountability if needed, whether that's from a study buddy or from a tutor or someone at All Access Dietetics, of course. And then you're going to feel increasing confidence by following this plan. You're going to build momentum. You're going to be knowing you're studying the right way for your learning style and your weaknesses that you need to address in your plan and for the exam. Because this is not a college exam, right? It is very different than that. So, and then finally, when you get to take the exam for that first time, your confidence will be higher because you'll know you did what was best for the exam and for you. And that's where we want you to feel. That's what we want all of our clients to feel like before they take the exam, is that they did what was right for them and not what everyone else did, even with the same products, which I'll explain that later at the end of the webinar. All right, let's get into it. So the 3 strategies to pass the RD exam on the first try. And just so you know, I will answer questions at the end of the presentation, which should be in about 13 to 15 minutes. All right, number 1, understand that this isn't like a college exam. Now, here are some facts to know, and then we're going to talk about what does this mean for you, right? So how should this impact how you think about your approach to the exam? Number 1, this is a credentialing exam. This is an exam that is designed to determine whether you are ready for the real world as a practicing dietitian on your own with no supervision, of anyone to oversee your notes, like as if you were a dietetic intern. This is a credentialing exam. So what does this mean? This means that knowledge and textbook knowledge is not going to be enough to pass, because you need the critical thinking, the real world application, the clinical judgment, the management judgment, the ability to take many different details and ideas and choose the best decision in the real world. And that's how you will be tested on the exam as well. So you'll have to think of it will be more complex than maybe what your DPD exams or college exams were like, because this is a credentialing exam. All right, so that's the first one. Next, it is computer adapted. I told you that we were going to get back to this. Computer adapted means that the exam is set up in a way that allows the exam, the algorithm or whatever, to determine if you have enough competence to pass the exam. And they've said all those numbers, and I don't have those exact numbers or algorithms or how that exactly works, except that if you are struggling with a certain area of the exam, with a certain domain, the computer will keep giving you those questions to prove to it, so you can prove to it that you're competent enough in that domain. And so that means that you might get some of these other domains, like you might be doing really well in them, but then start to get these questions that you were getting wrong before. You're getting more like them because the computer is giving you a chance to get them right. And you can, do that then, and then you can pass the exam. But it takes like the journey through all of those questions to allow the computer to determine if you're competent enough. That's why, if speaking from repeat test takers that have done this multiple times, they will feel very different about the topics based on whether they had weaknesses in certain areas or not. And they will have different experiences based on, their performance throughout the exam because it might be different on that second or third attempt. Okay, so it is computer adapted, and then the scores are weighted. So that means that, I think you remember there was a food service section, the domain 4, that's 13%. And let's say there's a rough average like that you would need to get X percentage right to pass the exam. There is no set because it's very complicated because it just depends on the types of questions, their degree of difficulty. But just think that if you couldn't answer enough of even that 13% domain, you won't pass the exam. You can't just answer everything perfectly and then get all of the food service questions wrong and still pass the exam. So the scores are weighted to ensure that you have competency in each domain. All right. So that is very important because you can't just assume that, oh, okay, I don't know that area that well, but if I know all these other areas really well, I'll be fine. That's not going to work. And then you will likely be choosing between 2 right answers. This comes up all the time with some of the more difficult questions on the exam. You have to choose between, you'll like narrow it down between 2 answers, and you will have to determine which one is correct. And this is on purpose. I think that people that create the exam questions are purposely trying to make sure that you are making the best possible decision based on the information in the question, and you have that deeper understanding and critical thinking ability that is required to go out in the real world and practice as a dietitian unsupervised, right? So that is why you will run into this and why it's so important to have a deeper understanding of topics and understand rationales and the whole decision making and critical thinking that goes into everything, not just the knowledge. And finally, you will likely see topics that you have never seen before on the exam. What does that mean for you? That means that by understanding bigger picture topics, understanding rationale, and really like not just memorizing things, you will be able to use process of elimination, your own critical thinking skills, and discern what is the best answer and give yourself the best possible chance of getting that question right. Okay, so those are all things that you need to understand, and that's why it's not like a college exam or maybe like an exam you've ever had before, unless maybe anyone here has taken the DTR exam. But that is why it's so important, because you really need to understand how the exam is different, because that helps you understand how your studying should be different, and how that, you can take certain things from what you did in college. We'll talk about that next, but there is a different approach to this exam because of the reasons that I just explained here. All right, next, we want to reflect on your past experiences. And because you have never taken the exam before, we have some different questions that we will ask to our people. And sorry, if there's a question, if you can just chat it, that might be easier for me to see what your question is. All right, so reflect on past experiences. When did you, oops, sorry, hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that, just had to check something. So where did you have weaknesses in your training or experience? So you want to reflect on that. Where did you have weaknesses in your training or experience? Was your clinical rotation maybe online? And you didn't feel like you got more of like the real world experience? Or did you just maybe have a rotation where you just didn't feel like you got a lot out of it, for whatever reason, many unforeseen circumstances that have occurred for students, especially with the pandemic and everything. But you do want to reflect on that, and you want to think, okay, what do I need to spend more time on, or make sure that I really, deepen my critical thinking skills on? And then if you could go back in time to a challenging class, what would you have done differently to get a better grade? I really like this question because it helps you prevent the fail, right? You think about, okay, everyone's challenging class is probably orgo, right? So did you need to go to office hours, or should you have gone to office hours more? Or should you have tried to, understand the sample practice questions instead of just memorizing them, hoping they would be on the exam itself? Like, what did you what could you have done differently? Could you have gotten a study buddy? Could you have held yourself more accountable to putting in enough time? Like, think about what those things are, because those are the things that you should think about adding when you go to take this exam, especially if you want to pass it on the first try. And then when you made study plans in the past, if you had the great plan, what obstacles got in your way? Think about what reasons, life, obligations, work, whatever, what got in your way? How can you remove some of those obstacles or figure out a more realistic plan so that you can, if those obstacles can't be removed, how do you work around them in the best possible way so that you can create that realistic plan that you actually stick with? And ask yourself, how have you done on standardized tests? How in the past, like, do you get anxious? Are you nervous? Do you overthink things? Do you run out of time? Think about all those things, write those down, and start to incorporate how you're going to overcome those things with your study plan. And have you ever experienced a computer adapted test before? I threw this one in here in case, just to remind you that this is a different type of exam, right? And it's, unless, like I said, you did a DTR or some other kind of computer adapted test before. All right, so that was number 2. The first one was understanding the exam, so you can understand how your study plan should be different from the type of exam that you have done before. And then number 2 is reflecting on your past experiences so that you can be really honest with yourself, prevent yourself from going and just listening to what a friend says or what you see in a Facebook group about what someone else did. And you can create a more personalized plan for yourself that will help you to like execute that plan and feel really confident with it going forward. And the third strategy here is create a plan that prioritizes critical thinking, not memorization. So I'm hoping from listening to the first 2 that you understand that this is a credentialing exam and that you need the critical thinking, which is one of the biggest skills that you need as a registered dietitian. And that's why they're testing you on it, for you to go out and practice in the real world when there's really unique cases that you're going to see, or unique situations, or so many different details that you have to throw into your head and then spit out like what you think is the best decision or choice in that moment, right? So that's what they're testing you on. Now, knowledge, having that knowledge, you obviously did so much work in your DPD, in your RD exam, or I'm sorry, in your internship or your supervised practice, and you should have built that up, right? You should have had that knowledge foundation and the critical thinking by working in the real world, solving problems in the real world with your rotations and making those muscles stronger, right? So it's important to know, though, that knowledge gets you close to passing, and then critical thinking is what makes you pass, right? And that is really, really important to know. So this muscle is what determines if you choose right between 2 answers that you narrowed it down to, or right more often or enough to pass the exam. The exam is testing your ability to make decisions in the real world setting as a dietitian, not just your textbook knowledge, right? You obviously have to have that knowledge foundation, but there has to be the critical thinking icing on top of that to really get you to that pass. So your method should address this, right? Your plan should address critical thinking. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how we do this with our program pass class. And just to give you that like real world example of what that would look like, right? So let's talk about practice questions. Now, this is something that comes up. Everyone feels like they need those practice questions before they take the exam, right? Now, what so many people do that I don't think is helpful is they will take hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 practice questions. They will take them at chunks at a time. Let's say they'll do like 20, I don't know, like just take a chunk and they'll do it. They'll answer them all, and then they'll go back and grade themselves. And then they'll circle the ones they got wrong, and they'll study, okay, what was the right answer? And, what did I not know there, and move on. We, with Pass Class and with Pass the Exam Prep, which is our study guide that teaches you the Study Smarter method, with that, this is how we approach practice questions. And we'll talk about why this will work. Okay, so instead of taking hundreds and hundreds of practice questions, you want to slow down the process and really study one question at a time. really dive deep into every single keyword that is in that one question. Do you know what that means? Why is that answer right? Why are all these answers wrong? What would that question or what would that answer have been if that question was a little different, or if it said this? Do I understand the whole topic? Do I understand the rationale behind behind this answer and why this is the one? Like, you're dissecting it, you're digging deep, you're spending like a half hour on that one question, and you're making sure that you understand the big picture. And the reason for that is now you not only have done more active learning by studying the question that way, but you're now preparing yourself for maybe 10 possible questions on the exam rather than the one that could possibly be asked, right? Like on the exam, if it was asked in this exact certain way and you got it right, great, then you're going to be ready for that exact one question. You're missing out because you might have just by chance gotten that question right, and you probably didn't know like the full topic well enough that if it would have changed slightly or been like a different part of that topic, if it was on the exam, you wouldn't get it right on the exam. And that's why I think people need to take 1,000 questions to feel more confidence, because they're not diving deeper into every practice question. All right, so that is my big gold nugget of strategy that I really want you to pay attention to. And it's really why in past class we have 300 practice questions, which is probably like some of the lowest for what is available out there. And it's because we use them in a different way. And we teach students to use them in a different way that prioritize their critical thinking. The other funny thing that happens with repeat test takers that I hear is that they're like, yeah, I did hundreds of practice questions, but I kept using the same ones and I just kept memorizing the answers. I was like, we do not want to rely on memorization for the majority of your studying. And that also means that you didn't really do active learning or critical thinking throughout your studying. And that those are two things that you need to do to best prepare for the exam. All right, so you can see the difference in the approaches of how people can use tools or use resources that can really make a difference on whether or not those actually work for them and for the exam. All right, I'm going to finish up here with some bonus strategies, and then we'll get to some Q&A in a couple of minutes, but I'll go quick through these. So definitely track your hours. Not a lot of people talk about this, but track your hours. And I have a very general recommendation. Obviously, if we worked with you personally, we could be more specific, but 100 hours, I think, is a really great general goal for people, and you should track that. I see too many comments on Facebook groups or things where they're like, oh, I studied for 4 weeks or I studied for 3 weeks. Well, how many hours did you actually put in? Because saying weeks doesn't really help people when everyone has really different schedules and they have varying levels of hours that they're actually putting in. So track your hours and then reflect throughout and adjust your exam date if needed and if you can. Some people don't do well with a looming exam date. Some people do, where they just kind of buckle down. They have that good pressure on them. But be realistic with yourself. Reflect on if that is a good thing for you, and don't be afraid to adjust your exam or do what's right for you. Definitely, if it is applicable to you, request test accommodations. So we know a lot of people that have come to us, repeat test takers, that they maybe have a learning disability or they have diagnosed like anxiety or something to that effect, where they could have applied for test accommodations, but they didn't. And so go to the Pearson VUE testing center website so that you can request those and do what they ask you to do to make that happen. That could be extra time, that could be a room by yourself, depending on what that is or what the test center provides. And then plan for 145 questions. Assume that you will get all 145, and then check your time every 20 minutes. And you'll want to try to answer, be through like 20 questions in 20 minutes. That might mean that you might spend like 30 seconds on one, 2 minutes on the other, and it just varies, but just by each 20 question chunk, check your time and just make sure that you're on pace there. And you can write those down on your scratch paper, like here's the question number I should be at each 20-minute increment, and that will just help you adjust or stay on pace as you go. And remember to answer all 125 questions at minimum. That's been a really big bummer for people, especially because they don't even know what their score was on their first attempt. So they don't even know if they were going to get like an 18 out of 25 or to pass, or they were right maybe a 24, who knows, or they already did pass, but they never got the score. So that's a big one. All right, now before we get into questions, obviously we have talked to so many people about how to pass the exam, and we have taken all of that feedback and all the things that we've learned over the past few years, plus the feedback of our customers. We've had over 1,300 people that have used our RD exam resources, and we now have what's called Pass Class, which has all of the different components that we think people need to pass the exam. So I invite you to check that out, allaccessdietetics.com/pass-class. And there are 3 different levels depending on what you need to pass the exam. So our basic is just our review classes, and that's more used as a supplement. And then our premium is our review classes plus our study guide, which has everything you need to know that method, to have the study guides, to have the practice questions and use it all in the right way, designed for the exam. And then the all-in is just like the premium, except it also has an exam tutor that is going to hold you accountable, help you create your study plan, give you those tutoring sessions, and give you the confidence to pass the exam. So that is something to definitely check out. And then if you do need help deciding what's right for you, I put these links at the top of the chat too, if you want to scroll up to grab them, but you can schedule a free 15-minute Pass Class info call to talk about what you think is right for you based on those maybe reflective questions that we talked about, knowing what your weaknesses are, how your past academic experiences have been, and decide what is the best for you. All right. Woo, we did it a little behind schedule, but I do have about 5 minutes for questions if anyone has any that they want to put in the chat. And I can definitely answer them. And then I will have to close this down in order to allow the next group of people to come in for the second webinar. All right, so Susie, the minimum passing score is 25. How is it calculated? This is a very good question. So it's definitely weighted. So you can imagine that this is how I do a basketball analogy because I'm the Chicago Bulls nutritionist, and like this is what resonates with me. So how I interpret it is that there are like free throws, 2-point field goals, and 3-pointer type questions. And I'm making up like the 1, 2, 3, but there's definitely like levels of difficulty of questions that are in the test bank, right? And so if you're answering some more difficult ones, you're going to get more like quote points for that. If you're getting easier ones, that's good too, but you just have to answer more of the easier ones to get to that magic number of competence, whatever that is. The 25 is not based on like percentage of questions that you got right because of that, because it depends on which questions and which level of difficulty they were and how many you got right. All right, so that is how I say it. So you're just trying to get obviously as many as you can right and answer the difficult ones that require the deeper critical thinking skills, getting those ones right, because that's just going to get you closer to the competency number that you need. Okay, I've heard that the test will just shut off when you've answered enough correctly to pass or fail. That is correct. That means that, let's say it hits 125 and if you got to that competency number by your score of all the questions that you answered, then you will pass. Now, if you didn't, don't worry, because you still have a chance to rack up those points to get what you need. If you get to the 145, or if you get to a number where even if you got every question right after that, you would not hit your competency points number, then it will shut off. So again, you don't want to freak out if it doesn't shut off at 125 and you passed. Like you can still pass, like you still have a great chance of passing, even if it goes farther into the 145. It just kind of depends on, the questions that they served you earlier and how you did on those. All right. They just started a study program through their WIC internship. Can I use this program to supplement with my study program? Yes, absolutely. People will supplement with the Pass Class Basic, or they'll even get the full Pass Class Premium, which has our study guide in it as well, and then use their other materials as references to dive deeper into certain topics if needed. Although, like I said, Pass Class Premium and the Pass Class All-In with the tutor, those are complete programs. You don't need anything else in order to study. Let's see. And then the Academy's RD Prep Study Package. Yeah, So the CDR is who makes the exam, and they do create the Eat Right prep, but I will just say that a lot of students don't know how to use those practice questions. And sometimes they can be a little bit harder than the exam itself, the exam questions itself. So it just depends on you as a person if you feel like you will use the questions in the right way. And also if you will lose your confidence by kind of being on your own with those really hard questions. I usually think that even combining those with like our past class basic or premium will make that experience a lot better, because you know how to use those questions and you'll have more support around understanding the material. All right, I do have to wrap up for this webinar, because then I have to stop it and I'll do the recording and then start a new recording for the next webinar at 12:45 Central here. But thank you so much for joining me, like I said, on a Saturday, no less. So it really shows how motivated you guys are to want to pass this RD exam on the first try. I'm very proud of you. You've already taken a great step forward and increased your chances just by being here. So hope you got a lot out of it. We will be sending out the recording, and then like I said, you will can certainly email me questions or check out past class to learn more on our website, and also grab our free RD exam toolkit so that you can at least get the free resources that we have to help you pass the exam on the first try. All right, thanks you guys. Have a good rest of your Saturday.